Hello everybody, thanks for your interest in my talk, and also big thanks to Eric for inviting me to be part of this meetup here. I will have to switch to my presentation now, so you will not be able to see my face, but I hope that the content that I'm showing is in the end even more interesting than seeing me here. Before I start, I want to tell you a tiny little bit about myself. My name is Nils Binder. I work at a company called 9 Elements. We are based in Bochum, Germany, building digital products and services. If you want to find out more, you find us at 9elements.com. There's also a blog at 9elements.com/blog where you find some of the articles that I wrote in the past. If you have any questions that you want to ask me maybe after this talk, you find me on Twitter. And yeah, feel free to contact me there if you have any questions. At 9 Elements, I work as a front-end designer. That means I have two main responsibilities. First one is designing nice stuff, designing website layouts. I do this mostly in Sketch. And then on the other hand, I'm a developer dealing with HTML, CSS, and a little bit of presentational JavaScript. And I want to show you now how these two personalities can work closely together. So here we have a bit of layout that DesignerMe has done. We have two types of headlines here and then two paragraphs. The word up there, Barrierefreiheit, that means accessibility in German. And you may know that in the German language we can build very, very long words, and sometimes this is really hard for a designer because hyphenation in CSS is not really well supported, and this can really get in the way. So let's look at the font sizes here that DesignerMe has used. We have a base font size for the paragraphs here of 16 pixels. And then I had a modular scale here in place. That means I multiplied this base font size by 1.5 two times to get the size for this headline here, and multiplied it by 1.5 again to get the size for the large headline. And everything looks nice. Handing this over to DeveloperMe, and DeveloperMe wants to build an accessible website out of this. And because it needs to be accessible, what is really important here is the ability to increase the font size. I want to make sure people can zoom in, maybe because this 16 pixels here are not large enough to be readable. And I want to provide two options for zooming. First one would be the browser zoom, and the second one is to increase the font size on the preferences of the browser itself. Now, after some time, DeveloperMe is ready and has translated this to a website. And we want to see how does it look when I increase the font size by 200% from 16 pixels to 32 pixels. Well, now it looks something like this. All the fonts are doubled. We have 32 pixels as the base font size, and then 72 and 108 for the large headline on the top. Showing this to DesignerMe and asking, do you really think this is how it should look? And DesignerMe says, no, not at all. And you could have told me before that the base font size could be increased to 32. I would have used a different modular scale from the beginning. So instead of multiplying it by 1.5, maybe I had chosen something like 1.25. Then for this headline here we have 50 pixels, and multiplying it by 1.25 again, we'd have 62.5 pixels for the large headline, and everything is still readable. And to be honest, if you told me to design a mobile ad, I would have done nearly the same. So here we start with a 16 pixel base font again, and multiplying it by 1.25 two times gives me 25 pixels for this headline here, and multiplied by 1.25 again gives me 31.25 pixels for the large headline, and this looks nice as well. Now DeveloperMe coming in and saying, well, everything looks great, so now we can get rid of this 1.5 modular scale and use 1.25 all over. So on a tablet layout it will look something like this. And finally, one last time, designer me coming in, looking at this and said, yeah, this looks nice, but let me be honest again. If I compare this to my initial layout, I think this one with a larger modular scale, for this device, it really looks a little more appealing, and I like this more than the one on the left. So, what can we learn from this discussion here? I think it boils down to this little sentence here saying the size ratio between individual text elements should depend on the ratio of the browser's base font size to the viewport width. For those of you who prefer to look at numbers instead of text, let's look at this way here. If we have a viewport width of 640 pixels and divided by the base font size of 16 pixels, we get a ratio of 40. If I increase the base font size to 32 pixels, the ratio is only 20, and this is the same ratio if I had reduced the viewport width to 320 pixels. When I now look at this at a viewport width of 320 pixels and an increased font size to 32 pixels, the ratio is only 10, so it's even lower. Now I wanted to see if I can find a way of implementing this ratio here with pure CSS. Bad news is I didn't find a way, and I will show you why this is. When I look at this division here, I can replace the 640 pixels by 100 viewport width, and I can also replace the 16 pixels, the base font size, by 1 rem. But when I use this in a CSS calc function, something like this, it doesn't work. It throws an error because you cannot divide two different units. I needed to have the computed pixel value of both of these, and this is sadly not possible with CSS. I did find a solution though, and I'm very excited to show you my solution in a minute. But before I do this, I want to point out that something like this could maybe give you a good solution for the problem as well. The min, max, and clamp functions are quite well supported in all major browsers right now. And you could say something here. This sets a minimum font size of 1.5 rem, a maximum font size of 2.5 rem, and then a desired font size of 1 rem, and additional there is one viewport width. So don't know, I only tried this for some time, and I think this could lead to a good solution as well. Okay. Now let's look at the solution that I made here. I'm here in CodePen. I will send you the link to this pen after the talk, so you can play around with what I did here. I will explain section by section what's going on here. Starting with the HTML, this is really straightforward. It's just a container and then some headlines and paragraphs, nothing more. And don't look at this thing down here. I will explain later what this does, but it's not really important for the example. The CSS is a little more interesting here. I have some custom properties here. First thing is I have my modular scale, and I set my modular scale to 1.2. This looks a little nicer here. And remember, designer me said, yeah, 1.2, it is okay. It could be better, but it's okay. And so this is my fallback for everyone who has JavaScript disabled, and I make sure it looks okay like this. Then I calculate some font sizes. Medium is just 1 rem, and large is 1 rem multiplied by the modular scale, and this goes on here, multiplying it with the modular scale multiple times. The rest is just font sizes and paddings, margins, and one pseudo element to create this little line here under the headline. And this looks nice. It is okay. And when I head over to the preferences of Firefox, I can set my base font size to 32 pixels. And you see, still looks nice. Most of it is, I think, quite readable. You can distinguish the headlines from the body copy. And I think this is okay. So let's set this back to 16 pixels and look what's going on in the JavaScript. I'm not much of a JavaScript guy, but these kinds of things is, yeah, I'm comfortable with doing this. And I will try to explain quite easily what I did here. First I get the root element, which is the HTML element. Then I get its font size in pixels. Then I get the viewport width in pixels. And finally, by dividing the viewport width by the font size, I can get the ratio. And this is the important thing here that I need. And I get this as a unitless value. So keep that in mind, we have the ratio saved up here. Now I have this new variable here, a modular scale set to 1.1. You may see this is even lower than 1.2. But I thought let's enhance it in both ways. If JavaScript is enabled, maybe there are times when we need a modular scale that's even below 1.2. And now I'm coming back to this ratio, checking is it above 40. If it is, I can set my modular scale to 1.5. If it's only above 30, I set it to 1.3. And if it's above 20, I set my modular scale to 1.2. If none of these here apply, my modular scale is left at 1.1. And finally, I'm updating my custom property here, setting the custom property modular scale to the variable modular scale I defined up here. Again, this part here is just for this little widget. You can ignore it right now. And I need to call this function. I defined this function up here and I need to call it, and I do this whenever the browser is resizing. So I have this event listener, and when it resizes, I call this function. And now you can see when I resize this, and now this widget here that I talked about quite a lot is updating. And you see the base font size here, you get the viewport width, and you see the calculated ratio down here. And you see it's above 40, so we have a ratio, modular scale of 1.5 here. And when I reduce it, once it's below 40, we have 1.3, and this goes down. And yeah, this looks nice here when resizing it. And again, I'd make my check here, changing the font size to 32 pixels. And whoa! Here now we have a ratio of 34, so we only have a modular scale of 1.3. You can see here above 30, and it's 1.3. But when I get really big here, so now I have a viewport width of above 1,400, my ratio is 46, and now the modular scale is at 1.5 again. And it goes down, and here I'm below 20, and you can see now that the modular scale is at 1.1. And I think this is quite a good solution. You can still distinguish these two headlines here, because this one has this nice little decoration down here. And all the text is readable. Even this long word here fits in to this screen. Well, that's it. I hope you liked what I had to say, and I'm really interested in your comments and questions right now. So thanks again for listening.